For this first topic, we'll be looking at ways of helping your clients to help your patients. So some of the things that your clients might do that might then affect the patients when they come to see you and make your job easier. So today's menu, I'm going to have five tips for you to have feline patients that are happier to see you. The first one is all about treats. So recommending that people do preference tests is something that's relatively easy to ask, and it's important because we want to have a ladder of treat preferences so that we have many options to help the cat in front of us. Because if I give you one fry and one fry and one fry and one fry, at some point fries won't be all that exciting or interesting. And if I then give you a carrot, well, it's a bit boring. But if I give you something else that you might like cheese, well, then that's more interesting. I'm not suggesting you give cats fries. I'm just suggesting that by doing the work at home first to have that ladder of treats where the client can say, my cat absolutely adores churro tubes, and second comes the temptations, and third he loves the little shrimps from Pure Bites. Then you have things that the client can bring and that you know are going to work. And so this has to be done on many days, not just one, because very often cats will go, okay, I might try this, but it doesn't mean they're actually going to really like it or want to eat it again on the following day or a week later. So you want to encourage your clients to try many things over many days. And of course, you can do this with dry treats, with more human treats, and also with liquid treats. And we want to think about two other things. We want to think about delivery method and practicing in the context of an exercise. So we'll look at delivery method in a second. Practicing in the context of an exercise is something that's going to help us a lot, and we're going to look at that at the end of the presentation. But by having a pattern created in the cat's mind that says, this happens, and then I get a treat, then we start having a cat that's expecting what's going to happen, and that's going to be good for us because the cat is going to be able to work with us a bit better. When I'm talking about delivery method, here I'm thinking a lot about more liquid treats, but it's also valid for dry treats. So most cats are not necessarily used to eating from a human hand. They might be used to eating in a saucer, in a bowl. If you put it on the exam table, that might work. It's all going to depend on the cat. And so why do we need to practice delivery method in advance? Well, because this is behavior. Eating in a certain way from a certain thing is something that we practice in advance so that it becomes familiar, and that creates enthusiasm and it reassures the cat because we've built a history of actually eating this way, this thing that tastes so good. So you've probably noticed the first time you gave a cat a churro tube, for example, they weren't exactly sure how to eat from that. It's the same thing with a syringe. I like the Baxter Exactamed ones, which I get at Brunet here, because they have this really small O-ring, and so you can really wash it and use it multiple times, and it doesn't tend to become stuck and then explode in the cat's face the way other syringes do. But you need to practice this beforehand if your cat is gonna learn to eat from it. We have lick mats, which can be put on a horizontal surface or can be put on a vertical surface like here with what I had at home, so puzzles, books, and a paper clip thingy. And so again, if a cat has never eaten from a lick mat, it's going to be a little weirder, but if it's something familiar, they see the client bringing out the lick mat, they're going to go, oh, this is always great. I have always good things to eat when that thing is coming out. So we want to have that history of having built a really nice repetition of eating from these things in these ways. You can have condiment bottles from the dollar store. On the top, you have using a spoon, so for food that is a bit more sticky, that can be an option that can allow you to orient your cat's head. And another one, if you have in particular cats that are on kibble that comes in only one variety for allergies or those kinds of things, you don't have the wet food. One thing you can do if you want to have a treat that's more longer lasting, like a wetter treat, so that you can, for example, distract the cat so he eats all throughout a vaccination, You can use a mallet and a Ziploc bag. Don't do this on your kitchen counter. Get outside, do it on the sidewalk. You need a concrete base that's really stable, but you can really easily and quickly just transform it into a powder. Add a little bit of water, cut the tip of the bag, and then you can dispense this really easily. So that's another idea you can take for food. Now, another topic is the reluctance to medicate. And so we know that pre-visit medication is everyone's friend, really, but your clients don't always see it that way. So we can talk about the fact that there are benefits for the cat. The vet visit is less stressful, and so future vet visits will also be less stressful for them. Their cat's well-being is important to them in general. There are benefits for the client, and that's something I think we really need to bring forward. It's going to be much easier to put your cat in their carrier. This is a big hurdle for which people don't bring their cat to the vet just because catching them and putting them in the carrier seems too big. But if the cat is really relaxed and a little slowed down, then there's a lot less distress for both the human and the cat when the time comes to go to the vet. There are benefits for diagnostics, so there's more safety for the staff and also for the client, who doesn't risk getting bitten and scratched as much when they're putting the cat in the carrier. There's a better exam quality, so they get their money's worth even more. Sample collection is easier or even just finally possible. Again, it's their money and it's much better used because now it's easier and it works. And you get more reliable results because there's less stress. Again, their money is really put in a place where, hey, it's going to be really worth it for you to have come to the vet. And so if they still have worries after that, well, you can certainly explain to them that the medication is there to help us help your cat better. And so the medication and the dose, they're chosen for your particular cat. You can stress that these are not new things. And just like we want to help to relieve physical pain, we want to help relieve emotional pain. And if they're still a bit annoyed and saying, you know, my other vet used to do it and it just got it done, there's an argument that I think is very, very powerful. And that's to say that the veterinary profession agreed for a long time to do things that today we know were not appropriate. And so putting a lot of people on a cat to get a blood draw, it's dangerous for the cat and it's dangerous for humans. And stress, it's also dangerous for the cat. We recognize today as a profession that that's not appropriate. And so why is this really powerful? Because you're putting a whole profession behind you in this decision. You're saying, we are not doing this anymore. And I understand someone who's, you know, taken half their day to come and see you, they don't have a lot of money and all that, it's difficult. And if they don't want, for example, to sedate the cat, that's a really powerful thing to say we do not as a profession do it anymore. Because it's hard then for someone to say, no, do it anyway. You just, you know, you feel weird saying that. But if you help yourself by saying this is not an appropriate way of doing things, and we recognize that. Recognizing that we've made errors is really difficult for us in our society. And so when someone does it, I think it's extra powerful. And I know that some veterinarians have always practiced without putting 5 people on a cat, and it really annoys them to be told this kind of thing, because they're like, no, I'm sorry, I never did that. So I apologize for them, but I still think this is a really good argument to have, because it's going to help you with your clients who are not bad meaning. They just don't have the knowledge that I have as a client, for example. And so they're not seeing this as something that's important when it really is. Another issue that we have with medication is that people for pre-visit pharmaceuticals, they're not necessarily able to administer the medication, and that's a big stress for them. So I want to bring you 2 things that are game changers. We do not have, for most cats, to actually even touch them for them to get their medication. They can medicate themselves if we set up the right conditions. So the first tip I have is the textured surface method. So I have a couple of lick mats here, but they're not the best. What you really want to go for is just simply a towel, or one of those bath mats that's really textured, or even just carpet. Okay, so anything that is textured so that it's going to mess up the whiskers a little bit. We don't want a flat surface like a saucer or a table. We want something with texture in it. And this can work for both humid treats and dry treats. So cats that don't eat anything humid, You can still use things like the powdered kibble that we looked at earlier, or treats that really crumble easily that you can really undo with your hands, such as Pure Bites chicken, for example. The goal that I want you to think about, because we in behavior, we know that taking a pill and swallowing a pill are behaviors, and so that's how we see it. How do I make it likely that you're gonna swallow all versus start munching on it, or start chewing? And so that's why humid treats are really great for this, because they create the right behavior from the get-go. If you have to use dry treats, well, the powder or the tiny bits and pieces that are powdery because you undid them with your hands, they're things that are going to promote swallowing without even biting. So this is where this can work. And I've medicated many cats with this, cats that I had at fosters, my own cats, cat that I babysat. I have a friend who's a behavior worker in the States, and she came back to me and said, oh my God, we were doing it with wet treats, but now we can medicate all the cats that we had trouble medicating before. Because it works with the dry treats when you use a substance that stimulates the act of swallowing instead of chewing. So it's a really, really powerful way to be able to medicate your cat. And the second tip is gelatin capsules, because gelatin capsules, they remove the bad taste. And so that's a really big hurdle. Like medications that taste bad, you can really, really quickly poison great treats because you've put something that tasted bad in them. If I offer you a chocolate cake and when you bite into it, you end up biting into, at the center, a little ball of salt. Salt is not poisonous, but you're likely never taking chocolate cake from me ever again. So it's the same thing with our cats. If we want to protect the value of our treats for them to medicate themselves, we really need to make sure that the weird taste is not a part of the equation. I love the thrivingpets.com, but they're in the US. In Canada, you can get Capsuline very easily. I look forward to the day that people in veterinary clinics will actually decide to keep gelatin capsules on hand and sell those to their clients, because if the clients don't have to wait for the delivery to arrive, they can start it now and they can actually medicate their cat much easier. But also, if they're unsure if they can really do this, they can buy gelatin capsules and just practice it with their pet. And then when the real medication comes, well, the only change is that there's going to be a pill in the gelatin capsule, but all the rest is super easy and is already well practiced. Of course, there might be pills that you can't put in gelatin capsules. Of course, that's going to be I always ask my vet, it's going to be your area of expertise to tell your clients whether or not they can do this, but it is really a game changer. And so we're going to see here Miley eating his pill. It's in the center, it's white, and it's in a gelatin capsule, which is transparent. And he eats things really easily. So here it's kibble, it's not even powder, and oh, it's gone. So Miley ate his pill, and then you see middleman. This is a Zylkene, so it's not going to be there long. Towel, Zylkene with churro. Whoops, it's already gone. I'm going to run it at lower speed. It's really there. Whoa! It's not there anymore. So this is a technique that has the power to help so many cats. The first person I saw develop this was Ingrid Johnson in Atlanta. And I can't believe that it's not been used more, because it's really a game changer all the way. Another tip is to make the carrier a reassuring pattern. So if we can train the cat to go into their carrier voluntarily, even hang out there, it's going to mean that when they go to the vet, their carrier is not just something that comes out when they go to the vet and they're like, oh, I hate that thing. It's, oh, that thing is a safe space. I eat in there. I can sleep in there. It's really nice. And for training, the simplest thing to tell your clients is to start to serve 1 meal per day near the carrier. And we don't want to stress the cat. So if they're super stressed of the carrier, we're not going to do it near the carrier. We're just going to start with the carrier in the general environment, and you'll have your meal anyway where it usually is. But gradually, if we can bring the meal closer to the carrier, at some point we'll be able to put it just inside. And if we have 1 meal a day where we do this and it becomes a routine, at some point the cat is going to go before us and going to go like, I'm going to go in the carrier because that's where the food is, turn around, and then you can serve the plate at the same place, just at the entrance of the carrier, but the cat actually went all the way back, all the way inside. So that's a simpler way of doing it that takes a little longer, but is much simpler for clients. We can use target training. We can use mat training for this. There's many ways we can teach cats to love their carriers. And of course, we can do approximations where we'll remove the top, for example, so that it's easier for the cat to develop that association because they don't feel as trapped inside. And finally, predictor cues or communication cues, which I hinted on earlier. So this is, again, all about creating reassuring patterns so that when the cat is in a vet setting, they're not as stressed. So for example, I could say, I'm looking at your eyes, and then I look at an eye, and I give a treat. And then I look at your ear, I look at the ear, I give you a treat. I look at your teeth, I give you a treat. We can also do this for palpation, so we'll palpate the cat. It can be only one word, like palpate, and then we'll palpate in many different ways, which are not going to be exactly like you do it, but the more variety we have, the more reassuring it is. We can do the stethoscope, and we can practice restraint for blood draws. Now, for all of these things, we're not necessarily going to start with, I'm really looking at your eye. It might just be, I'm putting my hands around your head and removing them immediately and giving you a treat. In behavior and in training, we work with approximations. So that means we don't try to go for the full behavior from the get-go, because very often that's going to be a lot more difficult for the cat. But we're going to start with, I'm just putting my hands on your head, and then I might have duration, then I might move my fingers a little more towards the top and bottom of your eye. I might be able to really look at your eye, and then I can really add duration once I have the final position. That's okay. And all these trials are going to be rewarded with a treat, and they might happen over many, many days. So this is simple training. Some cats, they won't even let you start with just the hands on the head. They're going to be like, what do you want to do? That's weird. And so we might have to have more coaching for these cats to help their people get on a good starting point that they can do this with their cat. But it's really simple training that can be really powerful, because if you think about it, if you're in another country, you don't speak the language, you get hurt on your foot, you get to the hospital, and they're trying to pull at your arm, and you're like panicking, no, it's my foot, but they just want to take a blood draw. But you don't know that because you can't speak the language. And so for cats, it's a bit the same thing. But if they learn, when she says eyes, she's going to put her hands on my head and look at my eye. It's going to be a little daunting, but it's going to be fine. Then I'll get a treat. Well, that transposes really well to the vet setting. And so this is also something I was saying earlier, we need to practice treats at home. If we practice this at home, the ideal thing is to, once it's well in place, we're going to move from one room to another. So we're going to do it in different rooms. If the cat goes outside, we might even practice it outside. Ideally, we'll even practice it with different people in the house, so that the cat really comes to generalize that it's not about being in the bedroom with this human, it's about like anywhere with anyone. If they say ear, they're going to look at my ear, and then I'm going to get a really good treat. And these are patterns that become reassuring and that make the vet visit less stressful. You are going to need to say those words at the vet, because the goal is to be able to say, ear, okay, I know you're going to touch my ear. I'm not going to be like, why do you want to touch my head? I know what's coming, and that's why it's reassuring for them. So I want to thank you for your attention on this first topic, and hopefully you'll have gained a couple of tips to help your patients and your clients.